All right, we are on episode 24. We've spent most of the time talking about Roger's professional career and obviously growing up. Roger, one of the things that we haven't gotten into is really your family side of it and just talking about your kids. So, you want to get into that a little bit?
Yes. In one of our episodes, I told you about how I met my first wife, Jenny.
In an alley.
Met her in an alley. She ran a bowling alley in Oostburg, Wisconsin. She was a counter girl and did the cooking. And I think they had 4 bowling alleys in there. And her dad set up pins. They didn't have pin setters. And I was home from school and getting a hamburger or malted milk or something, and I started talking to her, and we ended up talking for quite a while that night. Then I went back to Madison. We started writing her and ended up marrying her on July 29th, 1949. That was between my junior and senior year. And I had paid for my first year, used the GI Bill for the second 2 years, and used Jenny for the 4th year. I would come home and take whatever she earned and use that for my tuition, and drove my 39 Dodge back and forth. I think we had that in one of the episodes. And anyhow, we got married, and I told you about starting out with Cal Dutch. In the middle of my senior year, the owner of Cal Dutch called me and asked if I would come to his office on Saturday morning when I was home on vacation. So he offered me a job of plant. He told me he had bought the plant. They had bought the plant at Waller, Wisconsin. And the management didn't work out. He would like to offer me the job as plant manager. Now, at the time I was sitting in his office, I think I was 22 or 23. Might have been either one, but pretty young. So I took the job without me even looking at the plant. And it was, if I would have looked at the plant, I might not have taken the job. It was really a plant that needed help. And the staff was basically 65-year-old people and so forth. Anyhow, I said to Jenny, I want to live where I work. It's always better, if you live amongst the people that are working in your plant. So we found a $35 a month place in Waldo, back to the good old days of 1936 in Cedar Grove, when we didn't have any sewer and water. We had sewers in this house, but we had to use the water out of the cistern for flushing the toilet. And I think I told you about filling up the cistern. Anyhow, we lived there for 5 years. And my first child, a son, Greg, was born September 6th, 1950. And we were living in Oostburg at the time, and I was driving back and forth. And shortly thereafter, we moved to Waldo with our new baby and Greg. Our second child, I'll just bring up the second child, we'll go back to Greg. Diane was born 19 months later, so we had 2 children while we were in Waldo. And she didn't have a lawn put in, so I put the lawn in for her, and I built a playpen outside, fenced in deal, and made a sandbox with a canopy over it, and so the kids had a place to play. And in 1955, I said to my boss, I want to build a house. And he said, fine, I want to build it in Cedar Grove where we had a plant. And the plant in Cedar Grove was only 15 miles away from the office in Sheboygan. So he said, you tell Laura how much money you want. So they loaned me the money without a note at all, and tell her how much you want taken off your check. So I would take off whatever, $50 a month, my check, and if he gave me a bonus at Christmas, I would apply the whole thing to. So now we have Greg. He's 4 years old when he gets to Cedar Grove, and he started grade school in Cedar Grove, the same grade school I had gone to many years earlier. Greg was a bright young man. He never smoked. He never drank. I took care of some of that in the family, but he was just a good guy. I don't think he ever had a speeding ticket. He was just a good kid. And we spent a lot of time later on hunting and fishing, went goose hunting and fishing, did a lot of fishing, ended up going fishing to Canada. I'll get into that later on. He did well in school. I think he was in the top 2 or 3 in school, Cedar Grove High School. They had a bigger class than I did. And was a paper boy, did various things, and he was a golfer. He liked to golf. I guess all I can say is he was an ideal son as far as I was concerned. I mean, never had an accident in the car. I should take that back. I bought him a yellow Ford, and then I bought him a Mustang.
What year was the Ford? Do you remember?
That was a Ford, a Torino. You ever hear of that?
Oh, yeah.
That must have been a 1969 or something like that. And it was a red and white one. It was a pretty spiffy car. And then I bought the Mustang. And he used that to go back and forth to school. He went to the extension in Sheboygan for 2 years. He was on the golf team of the extension. And I didn't think he was going to be an engineer, but he went to some of the meetings and he came back. He said, I'm going to be an engineer. I said, what kind? He's a civil engineer. He said it sounded quite interesting. So he ended up getting a degree, and a master's degree in civil engineering, went to Madison. He met his bride-to-be. He said, I'm going to bring my a girlfriend home when we were living in Green Bay.
How old was he about that time?
Well, see, he was born in 1950, and we moved to Green Bay in 1970, so he really didn't get involved with that move other than just coming home on weekends occasionally. And since he was 20, he was a sophomore or a junior at Madison. He took the first 2 years in extension. So, and he did well in school, and he said, I met a girl, her name is Kathy, and her dad went to school with you. So he brought Kathy home on a weekend, and turned out that her dad had gone to, it was either in a semester behind me or some of his classes were with me, but of course I didn't know him at the time. And he ended up being the superintendent of the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District. He was a chem engineer. Now, Kathy was going to school. She was going to be a chem engineer. And I had graduated. I was a chem engineer. And my brother, Richard, came later on. He was a chem engineer. So we had 4 chem engineers in the family. Now, Greg would bring Kathy home, and they skied, so we ended up taking the whole family skiing. They would come home several times in the winter, and I would get a couple of thermos bottles and fill them up with chili and hot dogs, and we'd go skiing to Pine Mountain. We'd ski all day and get in the car, put the skis on the rack, and before we got out of the parking lot, all of the kids were sleeping, and I was driving back home to Green Bay. But we had a lot of good times skiing. Greg was, as far as he got into band was, I think he had band sticks. He was going to be a drummer, but my other kids ended up playing trumpet, same trumpet. But Greg, he was small, just like I was in school, but he grew to be 6'3" when he graduated. Same with me. I was the shortest guy in my freshman class, and I was one of the tallest in my senior class. So I guess all I can say, which is quite something to say about my son, he never cracked up a car. Getting back to the Mustang, he had worked for Robert E. Lee, an engineering firm in Green Bay during the summer months because he was a civil engineer. And one time he was at the intersection without stop signs. You know, you both sit there, and he thought he had the right of way, and the guy hooked his bumper and bent it at a right angle. So he came home and he felt kind of bad that his bumper was at a right angle. I said, we'll take it down to the plant and we'll fix it. So took it down to the plant, and I took the bumper off. I got the acetylene torch out, and I heated up the bumper, and I got it straightened out. I got some aluminum paint, and I painted it. And I can still see the look on his face, and my son said to me, he was so proud, he said, "You should be in the auto repair business." But here I got his car fixed, and he never really, that's the most serious accident he had. I don't think he had ever had a speeding ticket. He was just an ideal son, a good-looking guy, married Kathy. Greg worked for Rexnord Corporation in Milwaukee when he graduated. For his master's degree, he worked on reverse osmosis at Madison, and he got involved with reverse osmosis at Rexnord too. And Kathy, I don't know if she worked for Rexnord or another company in Milwaukee. They lived in Sussex, Wisconsin, and I put covers in their house. I fixed up their basement and did a lot of work, put the garage door open there, the typical stuff that you do for your kids. And they subsequently had 3 children. They had Kristen, who also went to Madison. She was in, I think, liberal arts. She spent quite a few years flipping houses. She had a knack for looking at a house and seeing what you could do with it. And she would flip houses and really do a number on them by building an addition and so on and so forth. And they had twins, Brian and Jason. Jason is a finance man. He got a degree in business from Madison. He now works for Kuna Corporation, that's Credit Union of North America. He's involved in risk management. He has a high-level job at Kuna in Madison. And Brian, he has a degree in civil engineering, and he works for a consulting firm in Madison. So interesting, Brian and Jason ended up with valedictorian and salutatorian in their class. And they went to Hamilton High School, and I think they each had a $10,000 scholarship. I thought that was so nice of the school board to end up, they were twins, and they were close in school. Jason beat out Brian, but they ended up giving both of them, or each of them, a $10,000 scholarship. It was especially nice for me because I paid for their education. So, again, I say he was a good kid. And we spent many times hunting, skiing, golfing, good times together. Diane, she's the one that had lupus problems when she was a younger girl, high school, and then she ended up having melanoma. She worked at Procter & Gamble in the production area. Bright girl. She was number 1 or 2 in the class also. And they had 3 boys, Kevin and Tim and Nathan. Nathan ended up in River Falls, and he got a degree in conservation, and he now is National Resource Conservation Supervisor for the state of Wisconsin. He has quite a few people working for him, a big budget, and he's taken advantage of every opportunity that came across to him. He started out in Wyoming, ended up in Utah, I believe, came back to Wisconsin, went to Florida, and maybe Wisconsin again, into Florida. But he watched the bulletin board. If a job opened, he'd take an interview, and now he took the interview for state supervisor, and there's 72 of them, and he's one of them in Wisconsin. And he got the job in Madison a couple of weeks before Elon Musk came along with the budget deal. So that was a trying experience for him because they had cut staff and so on and so forth. But he's still doing his job. He's got a good gift to gab and gets along with farmers. We would go deer hunting, and in a day's time, he would know everybody within a mile of where his stand was. And the next year, they'd say, "Is Nathan up here again?" So he was and he also was a hunter. And he ended up going out to Utah. He was a big game hunter. He's had to shot a black bear. Most of this bow and arrow now. Black bear in Canada, that's in the record book. And he shot a big moose, and he shot mule deer, all with most of them with a recurve, not a power bow. He told me one story. He was in Utah and he was guiding some people on a moose hunting deal, and they shot a moose, and he, of course, was cleaning out the moose, and the hunter said, I suppose you've done a lot of these. He says, would you believe this is the first one? So he did well. And Tim, the youngest of Diane's children, you get kind of rambling back and forth here, he decided to be an architect. So he went to Minnesota. He was the only one that deviated from Wisconsin system, and he ended up getting his architect's degree from Illinois. He went to Minnesota and he got his architect's degree from Illinois. And he worked for an architectural firm. And about 6 years ago, he said, I want to be a policeman. So at 37 years of age, he took the test, did the push-ups, pull-ups, and everything else. And he's now a policeman in Waukesha County, and he was just promoted to detective a couple months ago. So he's doing well. And Kevin is the president of Spindustries. That's the third son of Jim and Diane. He went to they attend a Christian Reformed church in Brookfield, Wisconsin, and there's a couple entrepreneurs in that church that buy businesses that look profitable to them. So one leader said, I think we should buy Spindustries. And they said, who are we going to get to run it? And they said, Kevin. They had known Kevin from church activities. So they went up to Kevin and said, how'd you like to take a equity interest in the business? And he called me, he said, 37, if it doesn't work out, I'll find something else. And he's done a very good job, and they had a successful business. And Spindustries, it's hard to explain, but they cold rolled various types of metal into various shapes by using levers and fulcrums on turning lathes with a mandrel. It looks like a kind of an antiquated business, but they're making volutes for car washes and so on and so forth. So they have 3 kids and they're all working. And her husband, Jim, funny story, we came to Green Bay and Diane had a boyfriend that, he was all right, but I didn't think that he was the right boyfriend, which is a kiss of death for me for telling her that. So I didn't tell her that, but we started a church in Green Bay and we hired a pastor, and the pastor had 3 sons and a daughter. And I told the pastor, I said, send Jim over to our house. She has a boyfriend, but there's nothing written in stone as far as she's concerned. And lo and behold, Jim drives up on a motorcycle. And I thought, now what have I done? So ended up marrying her, and they were the most generous couple. I mean, Jim never passed up a car that was standing alongside the road, trouble. One time coming over the De Pere Bridge, he saw a couple of kids with a car stalled. He stopped the car, or made arrangements to get the car picked up, took the 2 boys, who happened to be from Warsaw or Soper, took them to their house, fed them, gave them a bed. The next morning, and they called the parents, of course, and Jim arranged to have the car fixed. Imagine that. I mean, he never saw the kids before. And the next morning, one of the boys said, is there something we can do for you? And I think he said, well, you can mow the lawn. So, and Diane, she did everything for people. When she was graduated from high school, I bought a sewing machine for her. I think I paid $900. That was a good investment. She learned how to sew, and she bought later models, and she could do anything. She made the bedspread. She made all the drapes for her house. And if somebody was going to get married and didn't have any money, they would buy a used wedding dress, and Diane would alter that dress to fit. Now, Diane died of melanoma, and she called me. I don't know where I should put this, but she called me crying. She said, I have melanoma. I said, what do you want to do? She said, I want to go to Alaska. I said, okay, you're on. So I hung up the phone. She had her head all bandaged up from the surgery to remove the melanoma growth, but it was too late. And got a trip lined up for going to Alaska. A nice trip. The boys, Kevin and Tim and Jason, I saw a deal where you could charter an airplane, a float plane. They would take 3 guys salmon fishing. So I thought this would really be something that they'll never forget. So I got this guy, I think he was an 18-year-old pilot with a 16-gauge shotgun to keep the bears away. And off they went up to a river in Alaska, and he taught them how to fly fish. And I think they couldn't get the smile off their face for several days. They imagine that, getting on an airplane with your 3 grandsons, and we did some mundane thing like whale watching. But they had a great time, and Diane had a good time. We watched the caving of the icebergs and so forth, but she died a short time later at the age of 50, so that was a big loss. One thing I'll never forget about Diane, oh, by the way, when she died, Kevin took his VCR camera and did a montage of all the things that she had made or done for people, clothes, drapes, everything else. And we played that on the video screens at the funeral home when she went. Now, what else was I was going to? Oh, she sent me a letter before she died. She said, I'm sending you this letter. It's not for her birthday. It's not for anything else, but I just want to send you a letter and thank you for all the things that you taught me how to do it. She was a great project person. She said, I would like to have tile on the backdrop in my kitchen underneath the cupboards. I said, okay, let's go. So I was retired then. I would get the tile and we would have a good time. And then she wanted to paper her hallway. They had a 2-story house. I rented some scaffolding, set the scaffolding up, and for some reason or other it slipped off the steps, and she was on the top and I was on the bottom, and it's a crashing noise. I said, how you doing? She said, I'm okay. How are you? I said, okay. I said, how's the wall? We got the wall fixed, and every house she was in, I made a sewing room for her with the dress shields and everything else, the spool holders for she liked to do the stuff and did a lot of it for gratis. Anyhow, she sent me this letter. I want to thank you for everything that you taught me. And above all, I want to thank you for never saying, when I asked you to do a project, why do you want to do that? And I thought that was so sweet of her, because I never said to her, why do you want to do that? Because she had, I think, already gone through that with her husband. So Jim, fine son-in-law, I think he kind of shook his head sometime between his daughter and me, because we never turned away from her project that she wanted to do. She was nice. And Brenda, she was born in 1958, and she had a degree from Whitewater in industrial management. She got a job at public service, and she went around to all the various offices and tried to update or modernize their system for paying bills and so forth, just industrial engineering of an office setting. And she married a career serviceman that lived in Green Bay. He was in the Air Force, and they went out one weekend and they got married, and he went to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. And it's hard for wives of servicemen to get a job because you never know how long the serviceman is going to be in that area. So she worked in Penny's store, and then he got selected to work on Project 51 in, I think it's Utah. That's a secret base, and you never volunteer for that job. You have to be picked because you have to have a zipper on your lip. You can't even tell anybody where you're going. He ended up with dual passports. He was in Somalia and Thailand. They dug MiGs out of the swamps in Thailand, brought them back to the U.S. and rebuilt them so that our pilots could dogfight with the MiGs, because the MiGs were cleaning our clock in Vietnam and the Korean War. So he would say, I'm going to be gone for a couple of months, and he'd be gone for a couple of months. So now she's in Las Vegas, and so I can't find a job, Dad. And she called me one day. She said, I got this job offer at Media Solutions. It's a company that puts on shows for people like Jerry Lewis when he was doing, was it muscular dystrophy or whatever it is, and they would supply all the video equipment, all the stuff necessary. And she said, I got a job offer to be a receptionist at this company. I said, well, if you're half as good as you think you are, you'll be a receptionist for 2 months, and then you're going to be doing something else. So a month later, the boss, who was a technical expert, just two people, he gave her a MacBook and said, learn how to run the Mac. So from that time on, she ran the inside of the office, and he took care of the technical stuff. And she worked there until 2016. And in 2010 or 11, she detected a lump the size of a pea on her breast. Turned out to be cancer, of course, and we thought we caught it in time, but I don't know if she lived the 5 years or not. She died in 2016. So here I lost a daughter at 50 in 2002. I lost a daughter at 58 in 2016. And my son, he worked until retirement, and then he and his wife bought a nice vacation home on the Wisconsin River, a big home right on the river. They could fish right from the shore, and he was great in gardening. He had a big garden and so forth. It was right near Poinet. And his kids were located in Wanakee, so it was close to the kids. And then a couple of years later, he had trouble talking. We found out that he had glioblastoma. So he died of glioblastoma. He lived, I think, for 30 months after they detected it. So here I lost 3 kids and a wife and a job, basically. So you can see how this European work fit in. It saved me because I still had a lot of energy, you can tell from the episodes, and I lived on a new family over there. And of course, Greg was living. We did a lot of fishing and hunting and golfing. Talking about fishing, I had joined a fishing group called Gin and Fin. The gin referred to 2 different kinds of gin. We played a lot of gin, and sometimes they even drank some gin. And that was at Lake Seburin in Manitoba. I went there with a group of my peers from business. I think Bill Stokely from Stokely Van Camp was one of them. I had a couple salesmen from the can companies and so forth, and we caught a lot of fish. And later on, I took my sons and son-in-laws, 4 of us up there, and then now I have 5 grandsons. And I said, when they're 12 years old, we'll take them fishing. So starting in 1989, when Nathan, I think, was 12, all of the grandkids went up fishing. It was all fly-in. You couldn't drive up there. There was no roads up there. And we finally ended up with the 4th generation. Nathan's son became 12, and he went up there for 2 years. So we had gone fishing on a fly-in to Canada we had 10 or 12 of us. If I had an odd number, I would let somebody pick somebody. With Rick being in the Air Force, he had one of the astronauts that came along one year. And my wife, Linda, I showed her a picture of the dining room, which had wine glasses and a white tablecloth. She said, I think I can handle that. So I took her along, and she was the only female up there. And then a couple years later, I talked Kathy into going. So then we had 2 women and all of the boys, and we had lots of fun up there. And we went up there until COVID came along in 2020, and they closed the borders and they wouldn't let us in. And now the boys are talking about rejuvenating this group and going up to Canada again. But we had lots of fun fishing up there, and we ended up with all of the grandkids going up there. Now, Wisconsin, we had a lot of Wisconsin people. I went to Wisconsin Michigan. She was a foreigner. She went to Linda went to University of Michigan. Diane and Jim graduated from UW Green Bay. Kevin, he had a degree in mechanical engineering. He's the Spin Industries man. Brian and Jason went to Madison, one in engineering, one in business. Kristen went to Madison. So you can see we had a lot of Madison people. Now, Greg contracted the glioblastoma and nothing could be done. He had surgery, but they said he would live 6 months to 30 months, and he lived for 30 months. And Wisconsin went to the Rose Bowl. They went to the Rose Bowl in the late 90s, I think. I don't know what year it was.
I think it was 94.
95. Okay. Kathy, the engineer in the group, she said, Dad, we have decided that we don't want any Christmas presents, but we would like to go to the Rose Bowl. I said, okay, that's fair enough. So I wrote out a check for, I don't know, it was $10,000, and they had all of the wives, husbands, and kids, and they flew out to the Rose Bowl game. And Diane, in her talents with making stuff, she made this card display, and they could see on the stadium, it said, "Thanks, Grandpa." She had colored cards that they, Linda, or this was, was that 94? Yeah.
I think the first one was, but I think they were there after that as well.
Okay. Now, they had a ball. I said, "Do you have any money left?" She said, "Well, we had $500 left, so we rented a van, and they took us on a tour." So now they had another Rose Bowl when they played Oregon. That was in 2000, what? It must have been 2019 or 20 or something like that.
Something like that.
Anyhow, said, let's go to the Rose Bowl. And now Greg had already been determined to have glioblastoma, but he was still mobile, but he couldn't speak very well. So we took the whole gang, the Ubrex gang, to the Rose Bowl. We had taken the Victor gang to Alaska. So we had some real nice trips together, and they enjoyed football, and they're still going. Up until the time Greg died, they had 8 season tickets for the Madison Badgers, and they're a little bit sour on the Badgers now, but hopefully they'll come back. So that's basically my family. I had a great family, but to lose them all at those ages of 50 and 58, it was kind of tough. And then remember, I lost my wife of 43 years. So Linda came along, and she filled a big void in my life. And I even got her to the point where she wore a red jacket to Badger games.
Being a Michigan person.
Yeah. And Linda, I don't know if I told you, she was a National Merit Scholar. I always said she had more degrees than a thermometer, but she was very bright.
One picture I saw was you had gone to, Greg had taken you to the flight to DC.
Oh yes, the honor flight.
Yes.
That was great. I think everybody knows about the honor flight, where they take veterans from World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, and it was a really nice day. You had to take somebody to be your chaperone, and I took my son. You pay $500, your son could go along, and we had a nice day in Washington, seeing all the war monuments. I saw the Vietnam Wall with 52,000 names written on it, and the Korean Memorial, the Iwo Jima. It was really nice. I mean, you land at the airport, and fire trucks come out and with the hoses, and they wash the plane off, and it's a big deal. And on the way home, everybody would get up in the waiting area to let everybody sit down. And we saw the changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It was a real nice deal. And then we came back to Appleton at 9 o'clock at night, and here the whole place was full of family and kids and bands and everything else, and they had taken pictures of us. And I shouldn't tell you about the mail deal, but we ended up with mail from friends and so forth, and it was a real nice day. So I had a chance to spend a day with Greg. I spent a week in Alaska with Diane. And Brenda, I didn't have a chance to spend it because she was in Las Vegas. But she knew that, by the way, Linda, all of them were very active in church. And Brenda took care of all the music for their church, organizing it all and sang in the trio and the choir and played the piano. She did this for many, many years. Jim was an elder in our church. He was active. Diane was active in the church. And Kevin is an elder in their church. So they all have a good Christian base. They're well brought up in the faith. And it was a lot of fond memories, but I have missed a whole layer of family now, and I'm in this senior living facility. Most of the people here have sons and daughters that take care of them, but I don't have any sons and daughters, and your grandsons have all kinds of things that they're doing they don't have time for, and they aren't located in this area, so I made all the decisions.